Inside every man, two wolves battle. You choose which one wins. This is the one you feed.
So I wanted to welcome everyone, and my name is Octavio Lorenzo. This is Matt Parker, and
this is the one you feed.
The One You Feed. This is our podcast, a second episode. And today's theme for the One You Feed is surrender and faith.
Yep.
And before we broke into that, I wanted to give you the floor, Matt, to talk a little bit about why we chose the One You Feed as a name, and talk a little bit about the tattoo on your shoulder.
Yeah.
You can't see now, but
it
is there.
Yeah. So when I was in detox, which is one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had.
Sure.
And I could tell you some stories. I mean, people, fentanyl overdoses, sheriffs showing up to
horrible
haul people
stuff
away. I mean,
So what made you choose the wolf?
Well,
Tell us about that.
while I was in detox, we had to go to classes and all that stuff. And this woman came in, and as a part of her, talking to us, she told us the tale of two wolves, and I had never heard it before. And so it goes like this. One day, a Cherokee grandfather is sitting with his grandson, and he's teaching him about life. And he says, "Within me, there is a fierce battle between two wolves. One is evil. It's fed by hate and loathing and greed and contempt. The other is love. It's filled by light, love, empathy, gratitude, generosity." The grandson thinks about it for a second. He says, "Well, grandfather, which wolf wins?" And the grandfather says, "The one you feed." And that was such a pivotal mind shift for me that I started to ask myself questions, based on my behavior and the feedback I was getting from how I was behaving and all this stuff. Is like, which wolf are you feeding? And so that became just kind of a little bit of a hack, so to speak, that when I catch myself, maybe I'm, in a conversation, the committee in my head, is going on, I'm just, at all odds or whatever. If I reorient myself to, is what I'm doing, is my thinking aiding me or is it hurting me? And so I literally, I'm a guy that it's like, I'm going to take the chess pieces off the table if there is something that is a risk or, say, a threat to my sobriety. But I need simple things that can help me, remind me. And so I decided to get a picture of a wolf on my deltoid, and half of it is a black wolf and half of it is like a gray wolf. And it just represents the dichotomy that exists within us. And, since this is this whole thing, this life is about free will, it's am I hurting or helping myself? Am I showing up as the best version of myself? And which wolf am I feeding?
Yeah.
And so that kind of led us to some conversations about, the different things that we've done from a recovery perspective. I obviously have, I've been the one that was afflicted. You've come from the other side from a recovery perspective of who's, the family and everything. So part of this focus, and because of my experience and everything, I'm talking about, my journey through Alcoholics Anonymous, through 12-step programs, the things that I've done. But our focus is even beyond just, say addiction to alcohol or drugs. We're talking about people who have suffered trauma. It could be sexual abuse. They could have, body dysmorphia, body images, whatever it is. Those are the types of things that you and I are trying to help give people some solutions for. And so kind of the genesis, at least for the podcast, and something that made some of the biggest difference. It has nothing to do with it. Wasn't AA literature or any of that kind of stuff. It was this woman telling us a story that just changed. I started to change my mindset, and I started to challenge my thinking about stuff. And it was because I just kept saying. And so I have people in my life that it's like, if maybe I start getting out of sorts, all you got to do is ask me which wolf I'm feeding. And that brings me right back.
I love that sharing, and I really appreciate it. Today's theme for the podcast is surrender and faith.
Yep.
And sometimes solutions aren't as simple as just a one or a two, right? It's not just a binary choice, yes or no. But more often than not, I think the good wolf and the bad wolf, which one you're feeding, goes to, it can also be that question of, is this under your control or is it not?
Right.
And often the is it not under my control is the bad wolf.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
That we go off on a tangent. And I think And the good wolf is I'm going to focus on those things that I can control and the ones that I need to, right? It's within the serenity prayer. If you guys don't know what that is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
So that wisdom is critical because we've got to be able to figure out, suss out, hey, this is not in my control. As much as I wish it were, as much as I believe it should be, as much as I wish I were king of the world or queen of the world, I'm not.
Right.
So I need to just accept that for what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So surrender and faith is today's theme. And I wanted you to if you wanted to share with us a little bit about, because we worked together on creating some of this, but I love this piece that you've put together that we talk about surrender and faith. So if you wanted to kick us off with what we wanted to share today.
Yeah. So just, just a quick background, like I started this journey in sobriety when I was 19 years old. Was sober for 6 years. I mean, at that point it was binge drinking, college, all that kind of stuff. I convinced myself, we talked about terminal uniqueness. This is a disease that'll tell you that you don't have it, right? You have heart disease, you have diabetes, there's no denying those things, but because, the symptoms of alcoholism and this, affliction of mind and body, it doesn't manifest itself necessarily on the outside like a rash or anything else. It's hard for people to kind of understand what this whole thing is all about. And then I came back into the program at 34, and it took me 4 years of kind of, getting some time, having a slip, and, like a lot of people, I started to rest on my laurels, and the work that I did in the beginning of the program, I wasn't doing those things, so I wasn't living with the solutions, and, I found myself in a situation knowing that I shouldn't, but picked up a drink, and that led to a 5-year relapse. And this is a progressive disease. It gets worse, never better. And I mean, I can tell you, I became physically addicted to alcohol. And so I went to treatment. And so it's 3 years sober now. I had 6 years, 10 years, and now 3. And it's because of the work that I did this last go around. I flushed all of the knowledge that I had about AA, my preconceptions and all that kind of stuff. I said, I got to take a fresh look at this thing because there's things that I didn't do completely or whatever.
Sure.
And so as a part of this, most recent kind of journey through recovery, what really came to be, and this is always, it's something that, the spiritual experience, and it's a spiritual program, and a lot of people get kind of hung up or they're intimidated by that. Maybe they've had a bad experience from a religious perspective, but they have their biases that they come in with. And your commitment in turning your life over, surrendering to a power greater than yourself is the secret sauce that makes all of the rest of it actually work. And so I was asked to be a discussion leader in a meeting last night. And so since we were talking about this today, I was like, I'm going to make it around surrender and faith. And I'm going to focus on the first 3 steps of the program. So the first step is, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. And so a lot of people, I think, make the mistake that they think, and you'll hear them say, it's like, well, the first step is the only one that you got to get 100% right. Well, the first step, yes, you have to get 100% right, but a lot of people confuse and say that's when they've made the decision that they're not going to drink anymore. Really, what's happening at that point is you've made an admission to yourself. You are doing some self-actualization, taking stock of what's happening in your life, how things are going. And, if you're sitting in that chair, there's probably a good reason why you're there. And the people that keep showing up and sitting in those chairs are the ones that recognized and admitted they were powerless. That's what the step says. We admitted we were powerless. Right. Okay. That's good. Okay. So now I at least am facing reality in the circumstances that I'm presented with. Okay. Then when you get to the second step is we became willing to believe in a power greater than ourselves. Okay. Well, that's an acknowledgement. You still haven't made a decision. What you have acknowledged is there might be something beyond me, in this world that I should consider as a part of my program because it's going to be that important. And so when you get to the third step, is in the second step, the most important thing that people need to take away from there is all you have to have is willingness. It doesn't say, you have to do anything other than, are you willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? And when I think about, I made alcohol an idol. I made it my first priority in my life.
Yeah.
Right. And when I get to the third step is when I actually make my first decision, because it's not just at that point, yes, I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God, but I'm also making a decision that says, as a part of that contract, not only am I not going to drink, but I'm committed that I'm going to do the work that this program tells me to do, right? So I'm going to do a fearless self-appraisal, right? I'm going to do an inventory. And when I'm working with sponsees, it's like, this isn't about just the objectionable stuff, the character defects. This is about the good stuff too, because if I'm going to surrender myself, I need to surrender all of myself.
Okay.
And we know that the smallest action is worth all the best intentions of the world. So you don't have to do these things perfectly. It's progress, not perfection.
Correct.
But when you make that commitment and you make that decision that no longer am I going to be, afflicted by this, I'm no longer going to let alcohol destroy my life or addiction or whatever else it is. And then by taking that action, literally, get on your knees, pray. And it doesn't have to, people get hung up. I think they get intimidated. They have to have some eloquent prayer or whatever. It's just a conversation. Okay. But to kind of underscore, this concept of surrender, one of the best, analogies that you can have is rip currents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a rip current is formed when you have a body of water and you have different temperature differentials that create this outflow of current out to a lake, to an ocean. Yep. And if you try to swim against the current back to shore, which is kind of the most logical, it's like, I'm here, I'm getting pushed that way, I'm going to go this way. You're going to swim and you're going to exhaust yourself and you're going to increase the probability that you're going to drown. It's counterintuitive, but the way that you get out of that situation is you make a hard 90-degree turn, right or left, and you're going to go swim parallel to that current, and that's the only way that you're going to get out.
Yeah. And I think I shared with you that was my experience. I was 13 years old, and I was on Haulover Beach in South Florida, near Miami, and I got caught in a rip current. And as a matter of fact, I was a sucky swimmer. Like, I was horrible. But I see this man in water. Now, he's only about just above the clavicle, right? Like, it's neck deep. And he's struggling. So I go out there to help him.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm getting the lifeguards. The lifeguards come and they on the boards and they take the dude.
Yep.
And they leave me. Right?
Yep.
And so I'm now exhausted because I'm helping him. He's trying to take me under. I was strong enough to resist that. But now I've got to figure out how to get back.
Yeah.
And I started to panic. And I remember there was a voice, and I think it was a person, but God only knows, right? Who knows? Was saying, go parallel. Don't keep fighting it. Go parallel.
Yep.
To this day, I can't tell you that there was a person, but I know I was hearing people tell me.
Yeah.
And I know that I was exhausted. I was about ready to be done.
Yep.
And so I did go parallel. And what's funny is fighting that, there are two options. One, if you allow it to take you out, it only goes so far. Mm-hmm. And then you can actually then go around it because it's usually very centralized to one area. Or you can go parallel. So you could actually just let it take you out. In other words, don't fight it.
Yep.
Because there are ways out. This won't last forever.
Right.
It's ephemeral. Everything passes, and we keep saying that in life. And yet, that's a perfect example of being able to go through it. Anyway, I ended up swimming closer, parallel to shore. And then when I'm clear of it, I walk up and I'm literally collapsing. My family didn't even know because we're a small family gathering at the beach. And they're like, "What's going on with you?" Because we're all they're having fun, right? Good time. And I'm like, I almost died. The guy that was the thing, like I was there, I was out there.
Right.
Excuse me, nobody knew.
Wow.
And I collapsed. I was exhausted. I was absolutely spent. And so I think it does lead, and it talks about that story of fighting, and that water was reality. The rip current was reality. I was fighting reality.
Mm-hmm.
And as Byron Katie says, whenever we fight with reality, we lose, but only 100% of the time, right? And I also wanted to touch, by the way, on your piece where you were talking about giving into a higher power, somebody greater than yourself. And so there's a spiritual component to that, right? I just wanted to share with you, and you know, because you know my story, but also to everybody that's hopefully watching or listening, is that, in fact, it doesn't have to be necessarily to a higher power, to God. If that's your stumbling block, don't let it be a stumbling block.
Right.
Because when I joined Alcoholics or Al-Anon, right, which is a support group essentially, or people that have been affected by somebody who was in a program of 12-step, an addict of some sort. I said I was an atheist. Right. I'd struggled. I'm a recovering Catholic, and yet my higher power was that group.
Yep.
The people in my life, right? Just people. So it's not just you don't have to, if you hate organized religion, or you don't like organized religion, or you're bound up about something, let that go, because we're all here when we realize it, that we think my life doesn't matter, but yet it does.
Right.
You can have a positive effect on your life and on your world, and those people that you're here in service to something greater than yourself.
Right.
So don't let that stop you from taking the next step to being a better you.
That's right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
I just wanted to kind of double click on that, if you will.
Well, just to add to that, I mean, one of the things that you'll hear people say in the rooms is like, if you're struggling with kind of the concept of a higher power, well, you can draw on the kind of the spirituality of the group, right, from the people in the rooms, like,
Sure.
Kind of have faith and trust that you're going to do the things that they did. They might, they have a higher power. You don't have one yet. Okay. You work with that person and others to understand what their journey, has been. And I say this all the time. It's like, we need to have realistic expectations. And what I mean by that is, if I'm going to come into this program, I didn't get this way overnight, and I'm not going to, change that. But God seeks those who seek Him. So just taking that act of faith of saying, okay, I'm gonna be willing, and I'm gonna set this bias aside, because you know what? I think a lot of us in life would admit we have perceptions about situations, and it's contempt prior to investigation.
Sure.
We come up with an opinion, and so people come into the program and they are listening for the exclusions. Like, oh, well, this didn't happen to me. I didn't get a DUI. Check, I'm not an alcoholic. Oh, I've never lost a job. Check, I'm not an alcoholic. You got to start listening for the inclusions, the similarities, because that's where you're going to find connection to the fellowship that's there. And if you're struggling with a higher power, the first thing that we want you to feel if you come into one of those rooms is that you belong. 12-step programs are one of the only places that you are ever going to find that you're not in competition with everybody, that everybody that is there, they want you to find the same success that they got.
Right.
That's why they show up, to be able to give back what they've been given.
Right.
So one of the things that I kind of think about with this program is the concept of falling upwards, right?
Yeah.
And there's a book, I forget the name of the monk that wrote it.
Richard Rohr.
But, the concept is that for you to be completely filled to overflowing through your relationship with a higher power, you have to, I'm losing my train of thought now too, on this guy, that we need to render ourselves completely empty before God can do His work. And if you think about like a jar of water, right, and you put some food coloring in, right, it's going to stain that whole thing. One drop can change it. And the way that you can, change that back is you keep putting clean water in until it flushes itself out. So literally in the process of kind of breaking down my ego, my arrogance, my belief system about, what role this addiction has in my life, what it's costing me, all of those things. It's like I literally am falling, and we talk about getting on your knees, symbolically and
Right.
physically, like that gesture is important for some people that I've never prayed before. It's like simple prayer, get on your knees in the morning, get on your knees at night, ask him to keep you sober at the beginning of the day, thank him for keeping you sober at the end of the day. Just take those small acts of faith, right? And it's so I was very fortunate to be given the gift of desperation. And what I mean by that is that I was so completely broken, right? I mean, I was utterly empty and I felt spiritually bankrupt, right? I could not stand the guy that I saw in the mirror, right? I wanted anything but to be him for any longer. So this gift of desperation means that, like, it's like it opens the door. My willingness, opened the door for all of these possibilities. And it was in that time that I started to do work with you and work with my sponsor in the program and all that kind of stuff. So I showed up and I'm going to go do that work. And it's in doing that God kind of consecrated those weaknesses, because I got a chance to kind of look back over my life and the things that happened. And rather than just having this kind of rear view perspective, I was able to start seeing what it was like to be on the other side, probably of the table from me. I was able to see things from that other person's perspective. So then I started to be able to look at like my motives around things and all of that. And so I was able to start taking stock of, this is the stuff that I don't like, right? We're getting rid of that stuff, but then what's the good stuff, right? And through this gift of desperation, that it's like, I'm so out of options. I've got nothing left. I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Sure.
At that point. So in the process, and you and I talk about this, you get knocked down in life. It's not about how, it's about how long you stay down, and it's a choice how long you stay there before you get up. But this thing, you've got to have complete surrender. If there's anything that you're holding on to, you need to be able to let that go, because most of us are driven by fear, right? And one of the things that we know is that, love conquers fear. Love is the antidote for fear.
Right.
In a lot of, and that's the good and the bad, right? Because when I'm working with somebody, it's not about just helping you survive this situation. It's about putting you in a place that you can thrive, right? And faith and surrender and all of those things become integral. And for me, it's something that I do every single day as I re-surrender, because I'm only given a daily reprieve, right? And my sobriety depends on the quality or my spiritual condition. And so one of the things that I had to kind of learn and understand is like, it's some of this stuff is counterintuitive, right? I gain strength by admitting I'm powerless. Well,
Right.
Surrender is admitting you can't do it alone, which is what we tell people in the program, right? Get a sponsor, talk to other alcoholics, go to meetings, do those kind of things. So go be around the people that ask for help and ask them for help. And asking for help is a demonstration of strength, not weakness.
Very much so.
And what I'm proposing to people by considering a power greater than themselves and starting to act with faith is, we talk about all the time, trade in the high cost of low living, right?
Right.
This program, take stock of what it's cost you. And when you surrender, you're going to have to surrender your ego, your pride, your arrogance, your doubt, your disbelief, your skepticism, because those are all things that tell you you don't have what it takes, you're not good enough, it's not going to work out, right? That belief system that you are, there's so many people that are going to tear you down in life. Why are you helping other people out by tearing yourself down, right? Be around people that are going to lift you up and are going to help build you. So when you trade all those things in, what you get them replaced, and this comes with a relationship with God: confidence, trust, humility, hope, empathy, and love. Yeah. It's like, why would you not want to trade? You have two hands of poker. This one's going to keep me miserable This one's going to lead me to a life of hopefully joy and abundance and serenity and a life that's worth living. So you got to trade in that idolatry that you've had for this inert liquid, right? Like
Right.
I don't give 5,000 pounds and 4 wheels and a steering wheel power over my life, but yet I did with alcohol, right? It consumed me.
Yeah.
The addiction, right? Paying for it, hiding it, keeping the secrets, all of that kind of stuff. It's freaking exhausting. And it's a snowball effect because every time I would drink, having, pledged a solemn oath that I wasn't going to do that, well, then that's just more shame and guilt the next morning, which
Sure.
what makes me want to go medicate that. I don't like feeling like that, right? So surrendering is saying, I'm going to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because one of the most important things in life is the growth, right? There is no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone, right? So being prepared to do the work. And so for me, each day there's a third step prayer in the big book. And so every day I say that third step prayer, but I've modified it a little bit. And so it goes like this: God, I offer myself to thee of my own free will. And I think that's important, that I'm saying my own free will. I'm making this conscious choice that I'm going to give myself to him, right? Relieve me of the bondage of self so that I can better do thy will. Take away my difficulties that I may bear witness to those that I would serve of thy love, thy power, and thy way of life. And this is where I've added, through the sharing of my experience, strength, and hope, that I might shine the light into the darkness of another, help them to find a path to recovery and to a relationship with a higher power. And I end it with, let thy will, not mine, be done, because it's important for me to have that mindset that I'm going out today and I'm going to try to be of maximum service to God and to my fellows. I got my responsibilities, I've got all those things, but my attitude is going to be of such of, what can I bring as opposed to take from the situation, right? How do I show up and make somebody else's life better? How do I bless them? And there's a great story. Two women are sitting, and this woman is saying, I've been faithful my whole life. I've believed in God. I went to church. I've done all of these things, and I've never felt the hand of God. And right then, all of a sudden, the woman goes, oh my gosh, I just felt it. And then she looks and she sees that the other woman has her hand on her. And she says, oh, I thought it was the hand of God. She says, what do you think? God's got 5,000 foot long arms. He's just going to reach down from heaven or whatever.
Sure.
He uses the hands that are closest to you. So I look at going to meetings and working with other alcoholics as a privilege, right? To be able to give them what I've been given so freely, and to help them find a relationship with God, because that has made the biggest difference in my sobriety. Because it's in those moments where the rubber meets the road, where that temptation is striking, when I'm thinking about making a bad decision, that's when I'm reflecting on, how would, am I acting the way that God would want me to behave? Am I acting in a way that, takes me towards a greater version of myself? Because I just want to be better today than I was tomorrow.
Yeah, just a little bit. Maybe that 1%. Stephen Kotler talks about a 4%.
Yep.
But whatever number you decide, even at 1%, you think, well, that's not going to really help me. But the numbers bear out that you can have an extremely significant difference, 1%, right? Because this is the accumulation of marginal gains. This is, if you think about compound interest, right? And Darren Hardy talks about, the compound effect.
Yep.
Right, where it's not just the one thing, it's the continued process. Right. And we talk about within Heroic, for example, where Brian Johnson, who's a founder of Heroic, and you know him, and maybe some of the folks here, not the weird Brian Johnson, Bryan.
Not the lead singer of AC/DC.
or the guy, because this Brian Johnson guy is the one that's trying to live forever, which, will go just as we all expect, ultimately. But it's the Brian Johnson, Bryan, who founded Heroic and Optimize and some other companies. And he talks about soul force, that which is this ineffable piece of ourselves that people can almost see because of the life force, right, that it provides. Originally, Gandhi and Martin Luther King talked about that, about soul force. And so he's got a formula: energy times focus times what's important now to the power of consistency. So consistency is the exponentializer, but it's also what kills it. If any of those, if you don't have energy, right, because you're just on the couch all day, you're just watching TV or you're playing video games or whatever, you don't have enough focus. You're not focused on what you want to do. If you're just ambling through life, right? If you don't know what's important now for you to focus on, odds are you're not going to get anything done.
Right.
And so if any of those, if you're trying to rate those things, those three factors, and any of them is a 0, it all comes out to 0. Or even the consistency, if your consistency is 0, just every so often you have a good meal, or every so often you have intentionality about your day or a protocol. If every so often you don't drink, if every so often, then nothing happens.
Right.
Because there's no consistency.
Right.
And so nothing happens.
Right.
Because you're just sort of ambling about life.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this, of what we're doing today, which is that submitting of the will means that you're making an intention and you're focusing that effort.
Yep.
So that you know that it's important.
That's right.
And you're setting your attention by setting your intention.
That's right.
Our intention sets our attention.
Yep.
So that intention is important.
Yeah. Well, and then our values and belief drive our priorities. Our priorities influences the actions, which lead to the results. Right.
Correct.
So if you think about it, it all starts with your mindset and percolates down there through the execution. And one of the things that I like to say, and I like to frame this up as progress, not perfection.
Sure.
Okay. But I believe, like, kind of my formula is when the purity of my intentions, right? Like my intention is I want to be sober. Okay. When that meets the faithfulness of my actions, working with a sponsor, working the steps, doing all those kind of things, that's when the magic happens and when the miracles occur. That's when the promises of AA, things like we won't fear economic insecurity, right? We will know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. All those things come true because it's a combination consistently of I'm going to start and I'm going to be intentional about who I am, what I am, how I show up. And then I'm going to take the best next right action that I can, right? And this is not about perfection. This is about me showing up, thinking and doing in a manner that supports the best for me and for God.
Right.
And so what I also say is, at some point in this program, just like you have in life, you're going to have to take a leap of faith, right? You might have to keep taking that leap of faith. I had to make decisions over and over, sometimes an hour, every hour on the hour in the early time, saying, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. Because I've been conditioned that thinking comes in like, oh, and especially now when you've taken the alcohol, well, I'm even more uncomfortable now. Right. So then, it's kind of like, stop doing what you're doing. Stop leaping into this abyss of addiction and misery. Right. In what we talk about when we invite, people into the rooms of AA, it's a safe space. I mean, there's physical safety that's there. Some people that come into those rooms, they don't know a lot of that. There's emotional and spiritual and mental safety. And so rather than kind of, taking these leaps into, just supporting you're going to be stuck in the same place that you've been because nothing is changing. So then it's really, leap into kind of the safety of the arms, which is the experience, strength, and hope and love that you find in the rooms of AA. Because this is a place where we want you to feel like you belong. It doesn't matter what your job is, what your background, family history, any of that kind of stuff. If you are there with the intention of wanting to live a different life and not be a slave to a substance anymore, then we invite them in there because this fellowship is made up of people that have thought and felt just like they have. Jelly Roll's got a great song, and he talks about the desperation that people feel when they sit in a seat in an AA room.
Sure.
And he says, nobody comes in here on a winning streak. That's true. Our best thinking and our best life did not bring us into those rooms. So, this reminds me of, I think a lot of people think, and it is, if you have lived a certain way, it is a huge undertaking to say, I'm going to go scale that mountain or I'm going to go slay that Goliath. And there's a guy named Roger Bannister, right? And on May 6th, 1954, he did what was thought to be humanly impossible, and he ran a mile in under 4 minutes. What was funny, right? So at that time, nobody believed that that was even possible. And yet there's a guy named John Landry that 2 weeks later broke the record. By the end of the next year, 37 people had broken the 4 minute mile. So for one, don't believe for a second that something is impossible for you, right? Because there's plenty of examples like the Roger Bannisters that broke the 4 minute mile.
Sure.
A bunch of Roger Bannisters sitting in this room, in an AA room, in a clubhouse, right? So what did he do? Well, he made a decision. He says, I'm gonna break the 4 minute mile. So he took a leap of faith and said, I'm gonna take those actions. So probably got a coach, right? Which I recommend. Go get yourself a sponsor in the program, right? Somebody that's done this before to help you through the process. Come up with a game plan, right? You go to, train for a marathon. You don't go run 26 miles the first day,
Correct.
Right? You have to start and you have to progress over time. So that's the steps. That says, here's what the game plan is. And you got your coach, you got the steps. Now you got to go do the work. And we talked about conditioning before. We condition ourselves into the disease and all of that stuff. And it takes time to, recondition ourselves. Well, if you think about any professional sports team, they spend more time practicing than they do actually competing and playing the game. So winning starts with training. It does in the gym. It does in athletics.
Right.
Same thing here. We're talking about mental training. We're talking about spiritual training. And so I like to ask, people, and I posed this question in the meeting yesterday. I just said, do you have a 4 minute mile that is looming over you? Right? Could it be your sobriety? Could it be a relationship? Could it be something else? Right? Do you have disbelief that it won't work out, that your effort will be in vain, things are against you and everything? Let me tell you something. That's what we call stinking thinking, right? It is literally, there are enough people in this world, as I've said before, that are, going to tear you down. You don't need to help them. What I try to remind people of, and I believe this, is that I'm a unique, priceless gift from God, right? I am endowed with gifts and talents and blessings that are unique to me, right? So I need to get grateful and humble about what I have, what I possess, the things that I find objectionable, I'm going to go do something about. And I'm willing to do the work because what I know is that what I seek is on the other side of the adversity that I fear, right? And, Phil Stutz has a great book called The Tools, and talks about getting stuck in the maze and getting, through these things. And so, you and I talk about hope, and it's built up of a destination and pathways, right? Go under, around, over, through, and then it's agency, the belief. And so when you come into the room, hopefully you hear that experience, strength, and hope. And it gives you that light, that spark that you can, just like those other people. And you hear people saying, if I can do it, you can do it. Yeah. Right. So we're trying to do that. So we've got to,
Well, if I may, there was because I think that's really important. And you mentioned on a couple things that I wanted to talk about. So there's science behind this. This isn't, boy, this feels good and it sounds good, so we're going to use this.
Right.
Albert Bandura, or Banduras, wrote a book on self-efficacy. And there are 4 types that give people the feeling of self-efficacy. In other words, the feeling that I can do things, right? Yep. Agency. That term is thrown around these days a lot.
Yep.
Right? We talk about agency. And it's not that complex because there are 4 types. The one is a mastery experience. In other words, we've done some things. Right. Obviously, for example, in the Roger Bannister example, he felt very comfortable. He did that thing. He ran the 4 minute mile. So often we have some mastery experiences in our life that we can tap into that we forget. Right. So it's important, I think, even for example, with a person new to the program, is to mine their background. Right. Go into the background and talk about those things. Number 2 is a vicarious sort of example. Vicarious meaning I see others do it. And this is a great piece about being in the room with others, right? Because we surround ourselves with that. So we see, oh, they've done it. They've run the 4 minute mile, right? Or below, 4 minute or below. They've had, serenity, sobriety, life sobriety in their life. So there's that. We see others, right? There's the belief in success.
Mm-hmm.
That's number 3. We believe we can be successful because we know if we do the thing, if we do the steps, right? The process is important.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome is actually not for us to determine.
Right.
And then number 4 for self-efficacy, the physiological and psychological states.
Right.
So let's talk about, we talked earlier about working out. If you've never done 300 pounds on the bench press,
Right.
and you just strap yourself up to that bench, you try to unrack it or you unrack that weight and you're going to try to push it off your chest, you've never done it or even come close, you're going to be in trouble.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, typically, if I get in the weight room, I'm not going to throw up 275 immediately.
Right.
Because our central nervous system is actually not geared to do that.
Right.
You have to step it up, correct?
Yep. You gotta
So
prep
I
it.
think often, and you also use that marathon analogy where the marathon is a 26.2
Yeah.
mile race, and you just don't start that way. Some people have, right?
Right.
And then they can't walk for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
I think famously, Diddy, that is in a whole nother marathon of his life now, I think did a marathon or ran a marathon with no training, right?
How did
And
that
then
go?
couldn't, well, it was horrible, of course, because your physiological state is not ready, your psychological state is not ready,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So
right.
we have to train for those things.
Yep.
So in order to gain self-efficacy, we've got to be aware of those 4 elements,
Yep.
right? Mastery experience, vicarious experience, belief in success, and the physiological and psychological states. So we've got to have those, we've got to think of those things as, especially number 4 is critical because that almost becomes a checklist. Like we've got to be prepared for that.
That's right.
Emotionally, physically prepared. And so you can't ignore the science, you
Right.
can't ignore the reality
Right.
of what it takes to be successful,
Right.
whether it be gaining your sobriety in life or a new job or
Yep.
anything else, right?
Yep.
You can't possibly think, I'm just going to jump into this and I'm going to be fine.
Right.
So those steps, earlier you mentioned the layering, I think early on before we actually started officially on the podcast today,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned about the layering in a great book by Melody Beatty,
Mm-hmm.
who's you're probably familiar with
Yeah.
in the recovery community, and she wrote a great book on codependence, and she's got a daily, reflection book. I'll never forget on August 31st, which was a really critical day in my life a few years ago. And I remember reading that entry, which was for me the most powerful for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked about people that step into their sobriety of whatever it is they're freeing themselves from.
Mm-hmm.
Again, video games, food, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is.
Sex, shopping, you name it.
You're right. It doesn't matter. You can't just remove. So where you've arrived is you've got these layers of swaddling clothes,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
They're there to protect you because you took them on when you didn't have something else.
Right.
They're a replacement.
Yeah.
But if you strip them off immediately, you're probably going to perish. Or you're really going to flounder. It's going to hurt.
Yep.
So you peel them off one at a time.
Yep.
Like layers of an onion.
Yep. Exactly.
Because your body has to become acclimated to that.
Yeah.
You have to take the steps.
Right.
Nothing happens just all at once. There is no magic wand, for Christ's sake.
Right.
There's nothing that says, oh yeah, now I'm ready to go. Let's go. I've changed this differently.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to a couple of points I wanted to make. And so I appreciate you, you kind of giving me the in for that, because I think that it's important that we see those ways that the stinking thinking that you talked about, like
Right.
this magical thinking. If I'm just going to do this, and suddenly my life is going to be great.
Right.
Suddenly
Right.
everything is wonderful, and the
Right.
birds are chirping, and the sun is shining,
Yeah.
and everything else. That's not the way it goes.
Right, right. Yeah, the analogy I'd use was the trench coat, right?
Sure.
I put on a trench coat, I go outside, I don't check the weather. I just am expecting it to be a sunny day. It rains, I get soaked. I go home, I don't get a better coat that's going to help protect me from the
Nope.
water. I don't check the weather, I just go out and hope for the best the next day. But I put another trench coat on and I walk out the door. That one gets soaked. By the time, decades of conditioning have gone by, like the expectation that I'm going to take all those coats off that have been just weighing me down emotionally, spiritually, even physically. It's a process. You put those coats on over time. You condition yourself to this behavior. It's going to take time. One of the analogies I love, kind of going back to the sports and the 300 pounds. So AA is a lot like, we'll say like a gym. And if I'm going into the gym and I've got a goal and I'm going to move a heavy load, okay, there's a couple things that are really important, right? One, my form is going to dictate whether I can move and maximize the effort. It's also going to potentially lead to injury if I don't keep good form. So kind of the program and going to meetings and talking to sponsor and working the steps is like, that's how you stay in form. Okay. What we know about muscle is that the way that you make it bigger and it grow, you tear it down. You create these micro tears in the muscle.
Correct.
Then during the recovery process, it builds another layer on top of that. Right. So if I'm going to move a heavy load and I've got to have good form, I'm embracing this process of doing the work because I know the adversity, the pain, the discomfort is going to lead to growth. I'm going to deal with this temporary discomfort because there's long-term gain to this. But when I go to lift that load, I'm going to ask some people to spot me, right? That's a safety thing. Because if I get in trouble, they can help lift that and lessen that load. They can help me move it. They can keep me safe. That's what sponsors and people in the program are. Those are your spotters, right? So commit to you want to get in shape, get sober, whatever it is, show up at the gym, set your goal, make a decision, come up with a game plan of what you're going to do, because you're not going to just lift 300 pounds, nor are you going to run a marathon overnight. It takes time. So commit to that process. Enjoy the process. What you're going to learn about yourself when you're forcing yourself to be uncomfortable, you're going to learn what you're made of, right? And so, one of the things that, I talk about kind of going back to the spiritual side of things is that this isn't a spiritual event. It's a spiritual experience. It's a spiritual awakening. And for most people, I think they have this misconception that like they're going to have this white light moment, a burning bush. You're going to see this vision of a city on a hill, whatever it is. And it's like, no, it's more experiential.
Right.
As far as is how it happens. I mean, there's, some academic kind of understanding to all of this, but a lot of it comes down to the time that you spend being still and being present with God. And prayer is picking up the phone and calling God. What most people do is before he answers, they hang up the phone. It's like you make the call and then you wait for the answer. For me, those answers come through people, right? He speaks to me through.
Sure.
So that's where I seek wise counsel and I get that direction. So God seeks those who seek him. So all you have to have is a willingness and an effort, right? He will meet you where you are. Like they say, the master appears when the student is ready. Well, don't face this, because if you fear the work, then you're selling yourself short. You're selling yourself out, right? And that's one of the first things that I want when I'm working with people. It's like, I don't want to just help you survive, put the plug in the jug and, all that kind of stuff, maybe clean up some parts in your life. No, I want this to be setting a foundation that helps you thrive, right? Because what I'm going to learn about myself, alcoholics and addicts are some of the highest producers, the most successful people in the world. They just misapply that focus and energy. So when you take that out, holy cow, right? So, get out of the way and stop, harming yourself. And we struggle with patience in this society, right? We're constantly bombarded with things that demand our attention and all of that kind of stuff. And so people don't, I think, have the right mindset as far as the patience that it requires. And a great analogy is old water pump, right? Metal thing, handles, got a pipe that goes into the ground,
Right.
and you pump that handle, and what it does is it's got a piston inside of this, pipe that creates a vacuum. That vacuum pulls the water from underground and up the pipe. When you first start pumping that handle, it requires a lot of exertion.
Yep.
After the water starts to flow, it gets easier. Most people quit before they start to see the results, right? We talked about it. It's like people can maintain an effort and a new initiative or goal or whatever it is for 6 weeks, and but within 3 months is what is required of consistent application of that for a change, a lifestyle change to
Sure.
occur. Too many people quit before the miracles happen because they have improper expectations about how this thing is going to go. How it goes for me is different than how it goes for you. I can't give you what I have because it won't mean anything to you. If you don't do the work yourself, you don't learn those lessons, you don't seek wise counsel, you don't start to change your behavior, start taking different actions, well then guess what? You're going to get the same thing you've always got. Experience is the best teacher. It just doesn't have to be yours. Don't make my mistakes. Why don't you learn from them? Avoid those for yourself.
And I think that there's a piece here, and I want to just tap on that for a moment, which is you mentioned something that's really critical, which is my experience and my way is not necessarily your way, right? So there's the old story of you go up to see the master, if you will, of Zen on top of the mountain, and on the mountaintop he says, "Oh, tell me the way." He says, "Well, I can tell you my way."
Yep.
But that's not your way.
Exactly.
And Joseph Campbell, who was a great mythologist, right? And if you don't know who Joseph Campbell is, you do, because he's the person who created or learned about the monomyth, which is the story of the hero's journey, right? Which is present in every Star Wars movie and pretty much any good story ever throughout the course of time.
Right.
And the way he developed the monomyth was he went to different religions and philosophies and people throughout the world, civilizations, organizations, etc. And that monomyth, meaning one, because it was an overarching myth and story across the entire world throughout time, throughout all of time.
Yep.
And in that was that that journey, that hero's journey, was unique to that person. That if you're walking on someone else's path, you're on the wrong path.
Right.
Because that's not your journey. That's not how you reach the dragon, to fight the dragons, to then come back with the story, right?
Right.
You have to be able to fight that dragon that is yours to slay. And when you kill that dragon, you slay that dragon, you consume the power of that dragon.
That's right.
Right? And that is the story. Luke Skywalker goes off, right? And he lives in Tatooine? Is that in the original? And then he goes off, right? He's going to fight the dragon. And he meets the guide. And I think that one of the things I love about us working together, and then when I started working with you originally 3 years ago, was that you need a guide in your life, somebody that you can call on for wise counsel that says, nah, you're not doing that right. Right? Stop doing that. Stop hitting your head against the wall.
Right.
You need somebody to say that. And the guide is very powerful. And in the hero story, oddly enough, the guide is the most powerful, yet the glory goes to the hero because he or she is the unfinished one, the person that needs to make that change in order to grow. And then return with what Campbell called the boon. What he learned, the lessons he or she learned, the lessons learned, she comes back from the journey, right? And then goes to the family, to whatever. It was in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy goes off, right? She meets the guides. She goes to find the wizard. The wizard wasn't what she expected, but she's fighting all the dragons, the evil witch, and she comes back with the stories, with what she gained. About the lion's heart, or no, it was the scarecrow. Scarecrow with the heart, right? The lion was courage or brain. Thank you.
We need to watch Wizard of Oz again.
Been a long time. Been a long time, dude.
My daughters are too old for me to remember that stuff now.
So just I want, because that I think ties in with that, where if we're on a hero's journey and we're following somebody else's path, we're not taking care of our own stuff.
That's right.
So it's good to be inspired by the story and then determine what is our path.
That's right.
To be intentional about that work
Yep.
so that it works, so that it takes hold, and focusing on the process. I think that when we are worried about the outcome, I think you've talked about the results are for God to determine, right?
Yep.
They're just not in our power.
That's right.
They're not ours to determine. We can only show up and continue to do the work.
Right. I'm responsible for the effort, God's in the results.
The process is, and and I'll let you then wrap up as we're going to finish up, is the process is the leading indicator.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome is the lagging indicator.
Right.
Lastly, very last thing on this subject, Maslow once said, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue.
Mm-hmm.
So happiness is in there the lagging indicator. Happiness is just something that happens when we live our lives the right way.
Right.
When we seek out wise counsel, when we have great friends,
Yep.
when we seek to laugh and love, right?
Yep.
Experience hope and
Experience strength and hope.
experience strength and hope with some love thrown in, right?
Yep.
Those are the things that matter.
Yep. Absolutely. And one of the things I think about, or I say to people is like, stop betting against the house, right? Like, for me, lots of evidence in my background, grandfather, uncles, all that stuff that struggled with this stuff. No, it's not going to happen to me. So I'm literally betting against the odds. The odds are stacked against me, and I'm betting. So what happens when I find a higher power and I get in the middle of a program like this and I start to make changes in my life? Well, then I'm starting to play with house money and I'm betting on myself. And so much of this program in life, chop wood, carry water, rinse and repeat. That's why it's a day by day kind of thing. And, one of my favorite quotes is by Muhammad Ali: "Don't count the days, make the days count."
Sure.
And I'll leave with this. Leave the conversation with this. So it's a story of a class of folks that are going through Navy SEAL training. They're going through Hell Week, and this is a story that's told in retired Admiral William McRaven's book, Make Your Bed. Talking about this obstacle, and it's a 2-tiered structure, and it's got ropes in between it, and you got to climb up the structure, and then you got to slide down the ropes, and you got to go through a couple of different levels.
Okay.
And what most people do is they get up there and they grab and they hang under the rope, and they go hand over hand across the rope. Well, what happens is like you're hanging there, your shoulders start to get sore, it start to fatigue, your arms, all that stuff, your legs are wrapped around that stuff, and you're inching your way through that. And one day, this guy comes, and rather than doing it like everybody else has done, he actually gets on top and he straddles the rope and he pulls himself down, fist over fist. The record had been like 7 minutes or something for this thing. He did it in under 3, half the time, because he went down the obstacles head first. The point is sometimes in life, in this program, you got to face the monsters. You got to stand up to Goliath. You got to do the work. And at the end of the day, this is this journey that you're on is one that is taken one step at a time, one day at a time. And just like, that SEAL, sometimes it requires some unconventional approaches, and you got to do things that are counterintuitive. You got to go down the obstacles head first. So that's what I got for today, and I got to go jump on my call.
Yeah. So we're picking back up on today's episode. And where we left it last was, don't count the days, make the days count. Matt had another commitment that he had to rush off to. So I just wanted to tell you guys about the next episode on TheOneUFeed. We're going to be looking at acceptance and reality is the theme for the next episode. We're going to practice looking at fact, or the facts in our lives, and what we do with that then. What action do we take? What virtuous action do we take after we look at the facts. So that's the next step. I'll have in the link below today's episode how you can contact us to talk more. We're available for public speaking opportunities to help your teams and the individuals that you know and love to be able to go about their lives so they can be their best selves today. Maybe not yesterday, but today. And then hopefully tomorrow with consistent application, we get better and better each time. Reach out. The email is also going to be in the link below. Thanks very much. Look forward to seeing you guys the next time on The One You Feed.